Okay, Sunday chat time. Actually, let's get that out the way. I'm going to run through a whole bunch of little items that I've got here and just discuss a random bunch of stuff. And I've also just been looking, as I was looking at the comments on the YouTube video from yesterday, I also saw that there's been a Spitfire crash, I believe, within the last couple of hours from right now that I'm making this video. Coningsby RAF Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, what it looked like to me was the light brown and dark brown Spitfire has crashed and is pretty smashed, and the pilot died. Have a look online, and the reports are only fresh, but quite sad that. Let me get this one out the way first. So I had said that my second Phantom was going to be red and white, and I thought that this red might be too bright. I'm not sure. You know, the other Mustang is in that bit of a darker red, and I think that one looks a whole lot better, so I'm probably going to go that route. Even with the white, this will look very nice, this red, but I think it almost looks a little bit too toy-like in a sense. So this is what I was referring to. The very bright red I'm probably not going to do on that Phantom. Now, one of you mentioned about the F18 in the red and white with the big maple leaf color scheme. Looks very cool on that one, and I am pondering that version of red and white, but I think I'm going with the darker red. This is the blue. This is the blue. Let's just get that. That's the blue that Phantom was sprayed in. 52 Revell color. I don't know when these were made, if they still... Oh, 1991 it says on there. I mean, I don't know if that just means that 1991 was the date. Where did I see that? There. Where the date was, where the range was started, or I doubt they would change the printing of these tins per tin. But anyway, there you go. That's a very nice color. And I don't really, you know, investigate these things. I sort of get tins. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not. And I didn't do anything with that one. I didn't tweak the color, mix in anything else, just straight up. Okay, when I do that filling, this is what I use. I apply a bit onto, you know, I just get a bit out on the blade and I spatula it on like that, which it feels to me like an awfully crude method, you know, sort of really putting it onto the seam till you've run out there, get some more, put some more on, but you have to be, you know, as soon as it starts setting, you can then mess up what you've already put on. So it's almost like, you know, you move along and that's it. You've got to wait for it to dry. What I do sometimes do, let's say I was doing this seam here. Let's say I was doing that. So I've spatulaed it on with this Scalpel and somewhat, you know, so that I don't mess up where I've already been. Get some more, put it on, get some more, put it on. Wait a little bit, like, it's difficult to say exactly how long, maybe 30 seconds, a minute, depends on what other areas. And then I'll sometimes use that to roll it, to try and get to really bed it in, because you never get all of the little, you know, it's not a smooth application. So you often have to go do a second round of filling, sometimes even a third round of filling, because as you've lightly sanded, you've seen that there's some areas that the filler just didn't go into. So I try and roll that filler, and it helps a lot, but you do have to watch it doesn't come off on here. So it has to be like a dry on the surface, but a little bit wet inside still, enough to mold. And you're not going crazy. You're just trying to roll it into a bit more even surface. I do on occasion just rub, but that's very dangerous because you can just rub it right off. So it's best. Now I've also got a couple of got a couple of, this isn't one of them, I don't have them right here, but rods are various thicknesses, steel rods. I've sometimes stripped various little machines and taken various parts out of them. They're nicely chromed parts, so very nice and shiny, as opposed to this aluminium, which is shiny looking but less glossy than a steel chromed rod. And that's very handy because it's such a smooth surface that your filler still tends to stick to the model. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. On that Phantom, I had to do 2 rounds, little touch-ups afterwards, and it's a little bit tricky because you sand the whole thing, and now you've got a perfect sanding except for the few small gaps. Now, if you fill those gaps, you've now got slightly higher areas on there, and if you sand down, you damage your good areas of sanding around there if you're not careful. So you have to do that's sort of why you use those sticks and things, so that you don't get any. But I do tend to use just that, just the piece of sandpaper in my hand, and very gently along the line. So I'm trying not to put any pressure on the surrounding areas and only take off those high areas on the second sanding. Okay, so that's those two. Oh, I use Scalpel blades. I have mentioned that in other videos. They last me, I don't know, sometimes weeks, sometimes maybe a month or more. Depends what I'm cutting, and because I'm also doing a lot of scraping action and cleaning things, like maybe on the inside scraping off a raised ejector pin mark. This sort of scraping of edges like that is not as harsh on here, but I mean I damage these things fairly fast. Right as it is now, it's not going to be cutting me easily. You do tend to keep it sharp over here and very blunt over here, but you sort of get to the point where you need to change them. And I've got a whole bunch of them. Got a stash of expired medical blades. At a stage someone was selling them, and amazingly I was able to get a whole lot. They do break off because they don't, they've got this section for putting into a proper scalpel holder, which I'm okay with. I prefer these holders. So it's not the most ideal situation, and if you put too much side force on, which I occasionally do, then it breaks right off. Have I ever cut myself with those scalpel blades? I have cut small pieces, like it's just slightly into the skin layer, especially when I've been holding it a bit too close to this part and working there, and I do maybe get a slight bit of a cut there, but in general I almost never cut myself. Okay, let's do this one. Can you identify that? Who's clever enough to know those wings? FX kit 172, and I'm sure you know it's a Dauntless. So on this FX kit I scribed off all of those, and I've built the wing, and I've put filler card in there. So it's joined perfectly the way it's supposed to be in the kit, so it's touching there, and that has left a certain gap at the rear there, and I've filled that gap so that your wing is, pretty good. But, and I didn't bring the aileron in here, it's ended up that the aileron is thinner and this wing is too thick here. Now one could have compressed it a little bit. I hadn't really thought that I hadn't planned that at the time. I suppose I could have. I was just happy to build it as the kit was, in other words, make it structurally strong within what is given in the kit, but it does mean that the aileron's leading edge is thinner than the wings, this part's trailing edge. So an interesting little build that I'm doing there. I want to do it in a diving pose with those dive brakes open, which I've never done before. But you really need those open. And do you think I feel like drilling a zillion holes out? And I've seen it being done, and you end up with some holes going a bit off center. And it really doesn't look good when you're displaying something which needs perfect symmetry on the holes, having some holes a bit off. I think I'll be able to do it okay, but it's not one of those tasks I'm looking forward to. So that's, I don't know how many is on there, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Could be 60 per item. And there's 4 of these, and then the lower one. That is a lot of little holes to drill. And that is why this model has just reached this point and has stagnated for years and years. I just don't feel like drilling all that stuff. I'm using the Humbrol glue on a lot of my large joints. And the reason that I do that is there's more bulk to hold the plastic. Now, recently when I did that canopy, the vampire canopy, and I used the heat gun, it exposed the weakness of this type of glue, where because of the volume of glue that you've got present, it is sort of like a big weld compared to a small weld with the normal glue. And although we will never be applying heat to parts, it sort of does show that a softening of the plastic itself with this glue, which affects the plastic directly, and having those two pieces of plastic weld to each other without this large blob, or let's say larger by comparison blob, probably withstands heat better, which is mildly irrelevant because none of you are going to go heating your models up to check. Anyway, I do use this for the bulk of my large joints, and the reason that I do that is it stays in glue form, because by the time you've glued some stretch with this, it's dry and you're over there, and now you need to redo this section. You know, the best I can do, I wouldn't even be able to do a wing like this. Even that size wing with thin glue, which is of course why people put it together and run the glue in the joint, but I often mess when I do that. So I'm happy with doing this, and I'm pretty skilled at sort of getting it, you know, running a line exactly near the leading edge with just enough so that as you compress it, the slightest amount might squeeze out, which is fine. Don't touch it, and get it all together, and you know, same on the trailing edge and the tip and so on. I'm okay with that. Let it dry, sand it off. I use this for most of my gluing, but this particular one, I found one of my other glues and I poured it into there because it had lost a lot of its flighty components, and it was a lot thicker, and this one was very low, so I've now adjusted it. You can see it's not so clear anymore. This one is a lot thicker now, which is nice to have a sort of a mix of them. I mean, I know you get the slightly thicker one anyway, but I'm not sure how many of these bottles I've got. I need to actually go and stash up. I like to sort of keep one in its normal form, one maybe slightly thicker. I haven't used this one before, but I did buy one, which is the quick setting. Now this one smells different. I don't know what it contains, and I imagine it's still mainly intended for styrene glue, but I'm interested to hear from you guys your experiences with usage of this. So far what I'm finding when I glue parts with it, apart from the fact that it, you know, it goes in, it glues, and it evaporates pretty fast, and it's made with a different chemical. Are you finding the joints good? Does anyone use this for major joints is what I'm actually asking. Do any of you glue wings, fuselages, or, you know, things that Need a bit of strength to keep them together. Well, I shouldn't say strength. What's the word I'm looking for? They're important joints, as opposed to putting a joystick into a hole. I'm not talking about that kind of joint. So I'm using it, but and I'm not using it on very important stuff, very small. Like for instance, what I did with this is I used a little dot of this, get this into position, get the arms and the heads into position. Then I just ran a little bit of this onto the joint for what it's worth. I don't know what role that might have played, but anyway. So this is the 148th Phantom pilots for the red one. The blue one is already closed up and won't have pilots in, besides the fact that I can't find the other pilots because I've put them somewhere in this garage. And I was busy pondering how many months-years will pass before I find that one part which possibly dropped off somewhere right here and is probably so close to being seen. But anyway, so I'm going to spray this just now, and I'm going to use the method of using a dark overall color and then dry brushing a lighter color, which I normally do black and white, but I thought with this, and I'll show you the results, I'm going to do a dark overall green, meaning the overall color, choose a darker version of that for the main spraying, dry brush in a slightly lighter green, not slightly, somewhat lighter, and then look at all the little details and shoe coloration differences, gloves, all helmet related goodies. So very first stage is to get 80% of the figure into a reasonable coloration, so that you've got all the recesses with a nice bit of shadow effect. I've glued those in like that, by the way, and that'll break out easily enough. Or maybe it won't even break up. Maybe I was just thinking I'll just clip it off at the bum, and it doesn't matter that it has that little bit of extra into the body there. Not bad figures, I guess. Slightly different poses due to the front and back seat rolls. So I'll do a sort of a semi-reasonable research and painting on those. That'll be done with so once the painting this morning is done with the base and dry brushing, then it'll just be acrylics, low quality acrylics, just touching on colors of all the other areas, with the possible exception of the visor. I want to get a little bit of a realistic effect on the visor, so what I'm thinking is a gloss black with just the slightest hint of shininess. Maybe gloss black is a bit too harsh. I'll see. Not silver, no. I think black probably works there. We'll see. I haven't done a lot of that. Okay, so we've done the glues. Please do give me your feedback on the quick setting. And the last thing that I wanted to say was, when I come to glue in some parts on models, this occasionally happens. Even though I have access to the bottom of the seat and can clear off the painting here, clear off the paint to get a styrene glue joint, the cockpit tub is a little bit deep and I really don't feel like going and scratching out to get to bare plastic on the bottom of the tub there. So super glue is the usual option that people use. The downside of a super glue joint is, depending on how much super glue you use there, a slight bit of force. If you're accidentally holding this and you pop the seat off again, I mean, it doesn't always happen, but super glue is a brittle joint, and I occasionally use contact adhesive. So what I may do with this is you just put a nice little line of contact adhesive on the underside here, you wait a little while and seat it down, and that gives you a nice shock resistant joint. The seat is able to be removed by pulling on it because that glue isn't very strong, but it's completely shock resistant, which in this case I think is somewhat nicer. It'll seat down onto that glossy painted surface. It forms that rubbery joint, and it'll hold on. It won't squeeze out enough. You don't put on enough to it won't be visible. That's just an alternative thing that I sometimes do, using contact adhesive as a glue on some model parts. I think that's about it for now. I will do my spraying. I'll do a little bit of dry brushing. Yep, let's chat later then. Happy modeling. Cheers.